Okay, last week, Richard Curtis came in, and we didn't review About Time because it was, I think it came out Wednesday or something like that.
Yes.
So to give it a nice box office kick, it's the new Richard Curtis movie, and this is what Mark thinks.
Well, so basically, I imagine that most people already know the setup, but in case you don't, it's a Richard Curtis movie in which he's directing as well as writing, and it basically centres around a young man who is told upon his ascent to manhood by his father that one of the things that all the men in his family are able to do is to travel in time. He says, "Don't be ridiculous." The father says, "Yeah, no, I know it sounds like that, but you really can, and all you have to do is go into a closed space, like a dark cupboard, and
Like what you're in.
like what I'm in now, yes, if I turn the lights off, and close your eyes and concentrate very hard, and you can go back to any moment in time." Now, what then happens is that the film progresses in sort of two ways simultaneously. On the one hand, it's a romantic, melancholic comedy, bittersweet comedy about romance and love affair, but most significantly about a relationship between a father and the son. On the other hand, because it has a time-travelling motif, there have to be certain rules of time-travelling engagement. This is, if you're a science fiction fan, the first thing when you start talking about a time-travelling movie is, okay, what are the rules of engagement? What can you do and what can't you do? One of the rules set out by Richard Curtis is that you can't go back before the conception of your children without changing things catastrophically. Here's a clip.
I can't go back past the birth again, can I?
No, I should have mentioned that. You're okay till it comes out. But the exact sperm at the exact moment got you this particular baby. So if you do anything the tiniest bit different, you'll have a different child.
So every day up till yesterday is as it will always be. Lost.
Just like for everyone else.
So he does a certain degree of, okay, let's lay down the ground rules, things you can do, things you can't do. There's also, there is a terrific Basil exposition moment when Bill Nighy basically says to his son, Domhnall Gleeson, he says, as far as the butterfly effect is concerned, that doesn't really seem to happen. And he almost turns to the audience and says, and I suggest you don't worry about it. Because what happens all the way through the film is that on the one hand, Richard Curtis is dealing with, time travelling and therefore having to fulfill certain rules, but he's really not interested in that at all. What he's really interested in is a bittersweet romance that is primarily a story of a father and a son. And my take on it is this: when Richard Curtis was on the programme last week, he seemed to be very keen to say, look, I know it's bittersweet, but there are many jokes in it, and there are. I mean, Richard Curtis has got a very good ear for comedy dialogue, and it would, I think, be impossible for him to write anything without good, decent jokes. However, this has got a more melancholic tone than his previous work, and it is always the case that he's not somebody who edits rigorously in terms of the sort of running time of his films. And when he's directing the films, they do tend to be baggy and overlong. And it would be very easy to sit there and pick the film apart on a number of levels. You could say, oh, well, he always deals with the same kind of characters. He deals with, middle-class archetypes and people who have nice big, homes by the sea. And the lead character here is a little bit like Hugh Grant. And actually, when you start looking at the rules of time-traveling engagement, they fall apart completely because he sort of sets the rules up and then forgets about them. And the reason that happens is because in the end, he's not interested in them. What he's actually interested in is, and I don't say this as a criticism, what he's interested in is sentiment, in emotion, sentimentality. And the thing for me that was significant about Time is that as I was watching it, it was like having your brain divided in two, the thinking sentient part and the emotional, irrational part. And on the one hand, the thinking sentient part is going, that doesn't work, that doesn't make sense, that's archetypical, that's cliche, I've seen that character before, it's not breaking the mold. And I know people who, as a result of that, have taken against the film. Yet on the other hand, the other part of your brain, which I think incidentally is every bit as valid. I don't agree with this. You can just dismiss films because intellectually they don't work for you, because one of the primary responses of cinema is emotional. Just sitting there watching this film playing out, and what he's doing is he's revisiting and refining his courtship and his marriage in a kind of slightly bawdy way that you'd expect from Richard Curtis, but primarily he's got this relationship with Bill Nighy, which he's kind of coming to terms with, which is really what the film's about. And the film has this emotional core which starts to work and starts to work its magic and starts to work its kind of Capra-esque charm. And even as all those bits of your brain are going, it's overly long, it's overly indulgent, it's not really, it's got none of the dark cynicism of Groundhog Day, and certainly none of the structural rigor of Groundhog Day, nor indeed the structural rigor of Four Weddings and a Funeral, which of course he wrote and is, I think, one of the most perfectly constructed comedies of recent years. But the film works its emotional spell on you, and it's almost like the rational bit of your brain that's objecting to all the things that are wrong with it just starts to back off a little bit, and you start to feel the tears welling up. And I said this to Richard Curtis, last week. I cried. But not only did I cry, I came out afterwards and saw loads of other people crying as well. So my overall feeling about it is, it's very flawed. There are many things wrong with it, and if you wanted to, you could literally sit there and pick them all apart, and it would fall apart in your hands. But why would you want to? Because the film wants you to like it, and there's so much in it that is likable that to start just dismantling it sort of seems not only pointless, but specifically to miss the point. It's the cinematic equivalent of a great big warm hug. And as such, it is. Didn't you feel that same way?
It reminded me, and this I would have to accept is not a mainstream opinion, of The Road.
Really?
The Viggo Mortensen film.
Okay, I'm really excited to see where you're going with that. Okay.
No, well, not really, but only in the sense that I came out of The Road, as indeed people who finished reading the novel, thinking I need to ring my kids.
Right.
And I need to tell them that they're great. And you come out of you just think, okay, I'm going to ring my dad if I can, and say stuff, because it makes you have that kind of visceral reaction to the relationships that you've had, and so I entirely go along with you. And of course, it has Bellowhead, who are performing in the subway as buskers.
Yes, and this for you was the moment at which you went, okay, fine, that's it, I'm buying into this. If Bellowhead are buskers, I'm completely...
Plus Tom Hollander is fantastic.
He's very funny.
He's fantastic in pretty much anything, but he's one of the funniest things. Bill Nighy, as Richard said last week, he's playing himself. But in that, and in the clip we played last week, when he's explaining to Domhnall Gleeson what the family gift is, it's so awkward and so fantastic. I thought that was just terrific. And I'm engaged from that point.
Well, Richard Curtis's thing about, that he tends to write characters that he knows and likes is very evident. He doesn't really write characters that he doesn't like. And as I say, it's interesting from a critic's point of view. You're sort of expected to get in there and start digging it apart. But I've also read reviews in which you can almost hear people going, I want to take against it. I know some people who really dislike it. I know some people who just don't like Richard Curtis, what they think of as Richard Curtis stereotypes, but that's fine. I know people who don't like opera, and I know people who absolutely hate horror movies. That's perfectly fine. If you're in the market for a Richard Curtis film, you kind of know what you're going to get. And and also it's very easy to dismiss sentiment and imagine that it's easy to do. Sentimentality and schmaltz is not easy to do if it works. People, were always saying the same thing about Capra. Oh, Capricorn, everything was very corny and everything just works on an emotional level. Yeah, fine. I can show you 25 filmmakers who couldn't make an emotional connection with the audience if their lives depended on it. So for all the things that are flawed, and I think it is deeply flawed, I think there's no two ways around this. It is deeply flawed. It works.